Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to my shop. Today we are starting on the last piece in the desk. Yeah, I know that project that I started like a year and a half ago. We did the desk, we did the drawers, now we're going to make the shelves that go on top of it. And as you can see, the lumber is happy. So let's dive in. So here is what the shelves will look like. They're pretty simple. It's just two different shelves with an arch to provide a little bit of lateral support, and then wedges holding it all together. And this way it can all be broken down and taken apart, but it should be a very fun project. Today we're just going to be making the rough pieces and working through getting those out, and then hopefully in the next video we'll get this completed. It's a relatively simple project, though there are a lot of fun things to learn in this. The first thing that we're going to make is the arch that goes in the bottom, and this should be fairly straightforward by now because we've made quite a few of them for the desk and then for the shelves. It's going to start by resawing, and this is actually one of my favorite steps. It is a fun step as long as I don't have to do too much of it. In this case, I need to resaw 6 pieces that are slightly less than a 1/2 inch thick. I'm resawing them out of a 3.5 inch piece. And so they end up being 3.5 inch by, need to be a little over 3 foot long. And so it's a relatively, well, you got to make 6 of them. So there's a lot of work involved. But resawing is surprisingly easy once you understand the method. Even if you're just using a hand saw, it works pretty well. You don't have to have a big saw like this. Ooh, look, it popped through. So we're going to do that 5 more times, and then we need to plane them all down so that they're nice and smooth. I'll clamp them between dogs and then go at them with a fairly heavy cut, 3 or 4 passes from this, and they'll be down to a relatively smooth surface. I'll come in with a smoothing plane and clean them out, get them ready for glue up. These will be the laminations. We're going to do a bent lamination on this, so 3 of them per arch, and there's 2 arches, so 6 pieces total. I'm using Total Boat High Performance Epoxy. It is fantastic for this in that it will hold the curve very, very well. My one tip is be a little generous with it, allow it to squeeze out, and it actually has a pretty good gap filling. So if you do have any gaps, you want to have as much epoxy in there as it can, and that will give you a very strong, good glue up that will last for a lifetime. We're going to smear it onto one piece and then put it onto the other, making sure we spread it and cover every inch of the board. Gluing on both sides, and then we can place them together and watch it all squeeze out. It's kind of one of those happy moments. We're going to do it again for the 3rd lamination so that we have glue running between all of them on both sides of the boards. Now for the actual bending of this, I'm going to use a very large ratchet strap, and I've created this form that is the curvature it needs to be. The form isn't actually there to bend it. It will start the bending, allowing the ratchet strap to be pulled back a little ways, but then the form will tell me when it is at the right curvature. When it touches all 3 points, I know that I've bent it far enough, and until that point I just keep cranking down on it until it comes loose and it matches. So you can see here the form actually isn't tight in there, it's loose, but allows me to see that it's touching the top, middle, and bottom, so I have the right curvature. And yes, you can see we are happy. So you need to make 3 of these, but they are very rough. They're at 3.5 inches, and I need to take them down to about 3 inches. So we need to plane them down. If I connect them between dogs and then put a center point to hold the center, they actually hold in really, really well, and I can plane them just like normal, other than I kind of have my body arching through it. Again, we're going to come under the rough plane and get the surface flat and smooth. It doesn't have to be perfect because nothing will be referencing the outside edges. It just needs to be smooth. We're going to get it down with this, and then come in with a smoothing plane and make it purdy. Now we need to cut it to thickness because I want it to be 3 inches, not 3.5 inches. So we're going to use the marking gauge off of that side that we just smoothed down, and then we can cut it. It's just like resawing, except for it's only 1.5 inches thick and not 3.5 inches thick. The curvature may confuse some people, but really it's just a board, just happens to be curved. You cut it just like any other. Other than the fact that it won't go on the saw bench because it's too thin and curved and it would be hard to hold it in place. So putting it in the vise and doing it vertically works really, really well. Take your time, flip the board around occasionally, and to cut from both sides. That way you can make sure you follow the line really nicely. And then eventually you are right down to about the thickness you want. You can clamp it back into what we had before, smooth out that second side, and you'll be ready to go. You can see here I'm going off the line a little bit. That's okay. We can turn around and bring it back onto the line, and just as long as you don't go off the line in the other direction. Wait until they touch, and booyah, it cuts through. Now we can smooth out that side and make it pretty as well. I had some epoxy that dripped out of this, and that's going to be completely normal, but it made it a little hard to connect onto the dogs, so I had to chip some of that out. Here you can see we clamp it back in the 3-point connection, plane this side down smooth just like the other side, bring in the smoothing plane, clean it out, and just like that, it's ready to work. Now we're going to work on these shelves, and I have this beautiful piece of 14-inch wide white oak, and that's going to be exactly what I want. Now the problem is this is 5/4 thick, so we're going to have to plane that down. But we're going to just rough cut these to length right now. We're going to do the final detail cutting a little later in the project. So I'm just using a pencil and a big layout square. I've got a video on making that layout square if you want to see that as well. But just marking out everything, cutting them to length. The bottom shelf is shorter than the top shelf because the top shelf gets wedged, the bottom shelf just gets pinched in. For rough cutting length-wise, when I don't really care about the exact length, I like to use a buck saw. It is a very, very fast cross-cutting saw. It's designed for cutting logs. So for big boards like this where I just need to cut a rough mark, I'm going to do it with the buck saw. It makes it very, very fast, very, very easy. It's not a very clean cut. It's not an accurate cut, but it is a very fast, efficient cut. Particularly for cross-cutting. So we can cut these boards down. One of them is about 2 foot, one of them is about 2 foot 6 inches, and we're going to have these roughs on. Now the next step is going to be then thicknessing these down, and I'm going to take them down to just under 1 inch. I have 1.25 inches to work with, and I wanted a little bit thicker shelf on this to go with the slab top desk, just so it doesn't look way too thin in comparison. For the smaller ones, once the board is broken down, I can take it over to the saw bench and cross-cut with that. Here you can see just using the regular panel saw to cross-cut those down. Now we've got the legs to work on, and these are pretty easy. I actually just bought these pre-cut. They're 1.5 by 1.5 oak legs. And we're going to cut these down. We need 4 of them that are about 2 foot long-ish. And it's a pretty simple cut. And mark them around, slice them up, and do it again 3 more times. So you need 4 of these. And so these are going to go up through each of the shelves, through the arch, and be what everything gets clamped to. I'm going to cut the first one and then use that as the template to mark the others. And that way I have a reality that they're all marked off of that and not just off a tape measure, because a tape measure may vary a little bit each time and your mark might be slightly different. But if you use reality, you're going to get the exact same measurement every time. So make one, keep it your pattern, and use that for the rest. We're also going to be cutting the wedges from this in a little bit, but for right now we're just going to focus on the legs. Then at this point I was going to come through and flatten the shelves, but I did a lot of the work. Oops. Yeah, well, you saw these last as they were roughs on. Unfortunately, I spent a couple hours totally zenning out, planing them, had an absolute fun time, and then I realized that I hadn't brought the camera over to shoot any footage of it. But just to let you know, I'm not hiding anything. I did use the beast because taking off over 1/4 inch of material, this is a bit faster, and in this case it's a little more fun. So yeah, I do use these from time to time. If you want to see it, I have a whole video on why I use this particular one every now and then. So just imagine that they're flat. I do have videos showing how to do that if you want to see it, but for right now, let's move on with the project. So if you just imagine a lot of noise and rah, 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 you get the idea of what I did there. So now let's go on to the wedges. We're going to make these about 8 inches long each. And so we're going to take the leftover of the 1.5 by 1.5 and cut them down to about 8 inches long. We're going to need 4 of these because we need 8 wedges, and each one of these will then generate 2 wedges. So we'll have 8 wedges total, so we need 4 pieces about 8 inches long. Once we get them cut to length, I'm going to use one of them as the pattern to mark all the others so that they all end up being precisely the same length, which is always very happy when you put them together at the end and they all match up in length. And then we're actually going to cut on a diagonal across these, and that way we turn one rectangle block into 2 triangular blocks. And that it was one of those things that it's kind of surprising and not all that surprising, just difficult to think through how do I cut on a diagonal through this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark on one end about 1/4 inch in. I'm going to flip the board over, and I'm going to mark 1/4 inch in on the opposite face. And then I'm going to connect the dots and go from one to the other. And that way the tip of the triangle is about 1/4 inch and the other end is about 1.25 inches. And that way we have a little bit of a blunt edge in the end, so it's not going to be breaking off. We're basically making a door jamb But connect the dots, and then we need to cut from one to the other. Now I could rip these flat on the bench and cut long ways, but they're very hard to hold on to in that point. And so I find it easier just to put them up in the vise and cut halfway down, and I'll split the difference going right down the middle of the line. That's why I'm using a pencil. So if we cut from one end and then turn it around and cut from the other end, then we can meet in the middle. Now we're going to have a bit of a rough saw on this. We're going to have to come back and flatten it out. I found no matter how hard I tried to split the difference and go right down the middle of the line, my eye naturally made me go right off one side of it. And so in the end, one of my wedges always ended up being ever so slightly fatter than the other one. It really doesn't matter as long as the angle is the same. And you can see how they all match up on here, and there's a little bit in the middle where they split off as they meet. So we need to make 8 of these, which gets a little bit boring, but as we know, this isn't boring, this is sawing. There's a slight difference between the two. Yes, sorry, I had to do that. But cut them down and then plane them out flat, and that's about where we're going to have it for today. Next week we're going to come back through and cut the holes for the legs to go through the tops and through the wedges and mount this all together, and hopefully we'll get the finish on all of it. This is really pleasing when you plane them all flat and you get that nice smooth surface. So I'm going to use a rough plane to take down to right about where I want it. Then I'll switch over to a smoothing plane and clean them out. And with that, we are now happy. Yee! I love this part. So there you have it. This is getting to be a lot of fun. This is the last step in the desk series. So we built the desk, we built the drawers, and we built this. I think I'm going to do the rest of this in one more video where we have to do all the holes, the fitting up, and the finish. But we'll see if I can get that all into one video. And I will have plans available for this when it is done, as well as I will have a bundle pack so you can get the desks, the drawers, and the shelves all together. So if this is already out for the final video, you can find a link to that down below. But for right now, I hope you enjoyed this. This is going to be a lot of fun. This is, I'm really having a lot of enjoyment with learning bent lamination and working it into the furniture. It's a little bit different. But it is very enjoyable. So be willing to try something different, learn something new, and have a little bit of fun along the way. So I hope you liked this stock prep. If you did, let me know in the comments down below. If you didn't, let me know that down in the comments down below. All the likes, comments, subscribe, those things really help out the channel. Thank you for that. Speaking of helping out the channel, everyone who's scrolling over on the side, they are patrons on Patreon. Thank you for that. Without patrons on Patreon or members here on the channel who've clicked that little join button, this channel wouldn't exist. So thank you for that. If you'd like to find out more, there are links to that down below. And until next time, have a wonderful day. Check it out. I have more wedgies than a middle school. Okay, main chat.